You're short, and you're a terrible burden on your poor mother.
Portions of this podcast are made possible through the patronage of great people like At Lonely Bob, Big Albie, and Goldafish. Since we are trying to grow our podcast in every way possible, even if you can't be a patron, you can still help us grow by liking, commenting, and subscribing to the podcast.
Welcome, Rick. I have you at a bit of a disadvantage here because actually the listeners do too. We've heard the Rick track that I compiled for you. Some smooth 80s synth into some heavy metal guitar there. So
right.
I put together a little bit of music that make sure you'll tune in, so you'll have to hear that then. But that should let folks know that this episode of Short Topics is going to be a little different. I am joined by Rick Morgan here. And Rick, I used to think that Jason Lloyd from Horophilia was the hardest working man in podcasting and mixed media there. But I think you have far and away surpassed him with all the things that you're doing.
Well, I mean, I'm guilty of doing a lot of shows, but I mean, I can't take any credit from Jason at all because he's running a broadcasting network. So him and Bo Ransdale and Duncan McLeish, those three guys, man, they just blow me away with the amount of content that they're dealing with. So
I can't imagine that either. But tell me a little bit about what you're doing. You've got half a dozen different projects, and at least that maybe. I don't know. What are you working on right now?
Well, you know, of course, the thing is you and I, we've been talking for, 3 or 4 years now. We've always tried to do something together and just never could get those pieces together. So, you know, the Helming Power Hour, which is kind of where I started. Mm-hmm. You know, Danny, my partner Danny, which now there's 3 of us. We got Mark Allison in there with us. Mm-hmm. And we've taken a little hiatus because, you know, life happens and you have to step back a bit. And, you know, Helming is a whole bunch of fun. That's where I first started really using my editing, you know, talents, I guess you would say, or whatever. So I've always been intrigued by, you know, doing mixes for bands and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of led to us doing the show, and then that led to Short Bus Cinema, which is a side project I did with Johnny Krug,
right? Which
is, you know, the search for the worst movie ever made, which is just a fun show, man.
It absolutely is. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then I kind of branched off because with those shows, you're always depending on whenever somebody else can do something.
Right.
So you kind of sit there twiddling your thumbs and, you know, like you said, I'm so busy. I've got too much on my plate, so I bought a platter. That's the way I like to describe it.
Nice.
So I started doing, you know, of course, like you said, I'm a huge 80s nut. I will defend the 80s to the nth degree. And so I started a page on Facebook called Dude Looks Like the 80s, and really wasn't intending it to really do anything else. It was just a celebration of 80s. Out of that came a podcast. Oh, big surprise.
Indeed.
With Jamie Sammons, Brian Sammons, and then my buddy from Scary Dad, Billy Stewart. And we only got to do 2 episodes, and of course they're all doing their own shows too, but there's a chance, and I say chance, of us kind of reuniting and doing some stuff with this new thing I got going on. So at that point I had Dude Looks Like the 80s, then I had Under My Wheels, which is a podcast I was doing on the way to work while driving, which is interesting, where I'm, you know, dodging Amish people on the way to work and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
And then I had my horror podcast, which is House of Wax.
Right.
And that joker, you know, because it was more of a video type thing, you know, you could listen to it as a podcast, but I'm actually showing clips behind me on a green screen. It was a labor of love, lots of work.
Right.
And then, like you said, you know, life happens and you slam on the brakes and everything just stops. And I think doing a little reflection and getting back to actually listening to shows and stuff, even you guys listen to y'all quite a bit and saying, you know what? Maybe I spread myself too thin with all these different projects, so I'm trying to combine them all now. So now what's going on as we speak, of course I don't want to ruin the magic here, but as of today I've released the first episode which is a culmination of Under My Wheels, House of Wax. It's going to be movie commentaries and everything, and it's called Ric Radio. So it's kind of like everything I love rolled up into a Ric burrito.
There you go. Nice. So one place that you can feed all of your cravings. Yep. Nice.
You want horror? It's going to be there. You want 80s? It's going to be there. You want to do song request? I got you covered. Q&A? I'm all over it. So, yeah, it's just a fun way to, you know, a lot of it kind of reflects back on what you're kind of doing here with this show, man, is if you feel like doing this kind of movie, you can do that movie. You want to do this movie, do that movie. And I like that.
Well, here's the thing I was going to talk about was the fact that when the way I decided that you and I were soul brothers, or at least in spirit, at least we could definitely talk to each other. And it had to have been going back to probably to Hail Ming. It's when you busted out some Hall & Oates references. And I said, okay, this is my kind of guy. I got to see what this guy is up to and what he's doing. So that brings me to the reason I was the short topic here that I really had intended to talk about was and briefly here, and it's just really a short story with the punchline being the fact that basically in the late 80s. Going to the video store was something that was fun. It was, I'm going to say a big deal because I grew up in a small town. So for me, my entertainment was just going to the video store and just perusing all those boxes, all those crazy things. I think it's like almost like a lost art, like going to the record store and looking at album covers.
Absolutely.
You don't see that kind of artwork and stuff, and trying to pick and guess whether this was going to be a good movie or a bad movie based on that. So basically what it came down to me every week is I basically bought a VCR.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't have a credit card, so what I would do is I would go to the bank, cash my paycheck, get $200 cash, go to the local, either, I don't think we had Blockbuster at that point, so at this, the local video store or whatever, and I would buy, because I couldn't put it on a credit card, I would buy the VCR, their rental unit. I'd leave the cash deposit of like $200. I would get half a dozen movies. I would go home. I would watch them all over the weekend. I would then go back and get my money on Monday to then spend it for the week.
Yeah,
that was it. So I don't know.
Yeah, and the hours that you stood there just looking at these movies, and you were going to pick the movie based off the box.
That's it. There was nothing else.
That's the experience. People always ask, "How do you know about all these movies?" Because I rented all these crappy things back in the day, thinking they were going to be good because you looked at the artwork and
right.
Boy. You got a shocker from time to time, and
yes, you did.
Every once in a while, you got really surprised.
Yeah, there were some good ones too.
I was a little younger, I guess, because we did the rental, the rental VCR thing, where you would rent the plastic molded case that had the VCR in it.
That's it.
But that wasn't my money; it was the folks. But yeah, man, you stood there for hours just looking at the movies and. You look at the same ones over and over and over.
And is it worth
Get about
it this
3 or 4
time,
of them.
or is it, will I save that for next time? Yeah, it was a tough, that was a life or death decision for the most part. So.
And then back then, it was more of the mom and pop stores too, so it wasn't necessarily the big Blockbuster or, big franchises. You would literally go down to like the truck stop and these movies would just be lined up on the wall,
Yeah, that's it. Everybody wanted a little bit of a piece of that action, a little piece of that money. So you could rent them in some of the oddest places.
Yeah.
But, that actually, what I'm going to do is use this to segue into a topic. Rick is going to join me for talking about a movie, the movie Rubber. So that's something for you folks to listen to. I'm actually going to bring that up, and the reason I chose Rubber, though that maybe wasn't the best example, was you guys, you did Raw Force. And who, I couldn't imagine anybody else that's seen Raw Force, but I'm going to leave you guys with that. We'll talk, Rick and I will talk more about that in our episode on Rubber. So, For you and I, it's going to be just a couple of moments, but folks are going to have to wait till this episode actually comes out. So, thanks for listening.